Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that I think a lot of us have had experience with, personally or seeing it with people that we know and love, and that is the impact of bullying on children's mental health.
Mhm.
And we've got some really incredible sources that I think are going to give us a lot of different perspectives on this issue. We've got research summaries, we have expert opinions from child psychologists and psychiatrists, and we even have some firsthand accounts from parents and educators
Mhm.
who have witnessed, the effects of bullying in their own communities and in their own families.
Yeah, and it's a topic that's so important to bring to light just because of how common it is. You mentioned people having personal experiences. I think a lot of people have experienced this firsthand or know someone close to them who has, and it really does have a lasting impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of it all, I'm curious, just from a high level, how do experts define bullying? I feel like sometimes that word gets thrown around a little bit loosely. What are we really talking about here?
Well, it's funny you should mention that
Yeah.
because it's not just kids being kids or a harmless rite of passage. We're really talking about a deliberate act of oppression where one person is seeking to overpower another person and hurt them for their own gain. And
Hmm.
it's not always physical. It can be verbal. It can be emotional. And there's a deep psychological component to it as well.
That's really interesting. And it makes me think about something that I've heard before, which is that some bullies themselves might not even realize that they're bullying. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, there is actually, especially when we look at cases of abuse at home. Sometimes children develop harmful coping mechanisms, and those coping mechanisms can actually manifest as bullying behavior. So they might be unconsciously replicating patterns of aggression or control from their own lives
Yeah.
without even realizing the damage that they're causing to someone else.
That's really heartbreaking to hear,
Yeah.
but it's also, you know, a reminder that it's a complex issue, right? It's not as simple as just labeling someone the bully and, you know, writing them off. There's a lot more to it than that.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to recognize that bullying takes many different forms.
Hmm.
And those forms can actually vary based on gender. So, for instance, boys are statistically more likely to engage in physical aggression or, verbal abuse, kind of the classic schoolyard brawl scenario that we see in movies.
Right, right.
Whereas girls tend to employ more social forms of bullying, like exclusion or spreading rumors or manipulating
Oh,
relationships.
that's interesting. So it's almost like more under the radar sometimes.
Yeah, it can be a lot harder to detect and a lot harder to address, because it's not as overt.
Right. And then you have the whole world of cyberbullying, which is
Yeah.
a whole other beast entirely, it feels like.
Yeah, it's a whole other layer. And it transcends gender. It allows bullies to operate with a degree of anonymity and reach that just wasn't possible in the past.
It's like the bully can be anywhere at any time. You just never know when it's going to happen or where it's going to come from.
Right, and that constant fear and anxiety can be really, really
For
damaging.
sure, for sure. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the impact that this has on the victims of bullying. Because, we're talking about mental health here. This is where it gets really serious, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's critical to recognize that. Bullying doesn't just sting in the moment. This isn't something that kids just brush off. It can have really profound and long-lasting effects on their mental health and their overall well-being.
Yeah. I mean, what are we talking about here?
Well, everything from depression and anxiety to, in some cases, even PTSD.
Wow, PTSD from bullying. That seems pretty extreme.
It might sound surprising, but, imagine it from the child's perspective. Their school, their home, their peer group, these are all supposed to be safe spaces.
Right.
And when a child is bullied, it really shatters that sense of security,
Yeah.
and it creates this pervasive feeling of fear and vulnerability.
So you're saying that even a single bullying incident, if it's traumatic enough, can have that kind of impact.
Absolutely. It can be incredibly damaging to a child's self-esteem, their sense of self-worth, their ability to trust other people.
Right.
They might start to withdraw from social situations or even develop a fear of going to school. They're avoiding the place where they're supposed to feel safe.
And I can only imagine how much more challenging it is for children who already have underlying mental health conditions.
You're exactly right. Children with pre-existing conditions like anxiety or depression or learning disabilities, they're often targeted by bullies because they might be perceived as different or easy targets. And the added stress and trauma of bullying can lead to a worsening of their symptoms.
Wow. It's almost like a double whammy. They're already dealing with these challenges, and then they have this on top of it.
Exactly, and it makes it so much harder for them to cope.
This is all really heavy stuff, and it really highlights how urgent it is to address this issue. But I think it's important to remember that bullying doesn't just affect the bully and the victim.
Hmm.
What about the bystanders? They're part of this ecosystem too, right?
Oh, they absolutely are. Bystanders can either be complicit in the bullying by remaining silent, or they can choose to be part of the solution.
It's a good distinction, yeah.
And when no one intervenes, when everyone just stands by and watches, it sends a really powerful message to the victim that they're alone, that no one cares, and that the bullying is somehow justified.
It also reinforces the bully's behavior, right? They're getting away with this, so they think it must be okay.
Exactly. It creates this whole culture of silence and fear.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, when bystanders do choose to stand up and say, hey, this isn't right, that can have a tremendously positive impact. It shows the victim that they're not alone, that someone is on their side, and it sends a powerful message to the bully that their behavior won't be tolerated.
That's so powerful, just that one person speaking up can really shift the dynamic.
It really can.
I'm also curious about the bullies themselves.
Yeah.
We've talked about the devastating effects on the victims, but do bullies themselves face any long-term consequences for their actions?
That's a really insightful question, and the research suggests that they can. Bullying behavior is often a symptom of deeper issues, whether it's insecurity or lack of empathy or unresolved trauma. And if those underlying issues aren't addressed, they can manifest in other harmful ways as the bully grows older.
So it's not just about punishing them, it's about understanding the root causes of their behavior.
Exactly. We need to create a system where we can identify and support children who are exhibiting bullying behaviors and provide them with the resources they need to develop healthier coping mechanisms.
And build empathy.
And build empathy, exactly.
Because ultimately, it's about breaking that cycle of harm, right?
It is.
And creating a more compassionate and supportive environment for everyone.
Well said.
Well, we've talked about the broad impact of bullying, but I know from our research that there are some specific mental health conditions that are particularly linked to bullying. Let's dive into those next, Avers. Starting with disordered eating. This is an area that I find especially concerning because it touches on body image and self-esteem, which are already such sensitive topics for young people.
You're so right. It's a really, really delicate area, and what we're seeing is a clear connection between bullying, particularly appearance-based teasing, and the development of eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia.
It's like those cruel words, they plant a seed of self-doubt that can just grow into something really destructive.
And young people are already bombarded with these unrealistic beauty standards from the media and from society. So when you add bullying on top of that, it creates this incredibly toxic environment for their self-perception.
It's so true. And what's even more concerning to me is that disordered eating often co-occurs with other mental health conditions, like depression, anxiety, even suicidal thoughts.
Absolutely. It's not just about food and body image. It's a much more multifaceted issue with potentially very serious consequences.
I'm also curious about the link between bullying and psychosis, which is a very severe mental illness that can involve hallucinations and delusions. Is there research to support that connection?
There is, and it's fascinating, but also quite alarming. Bullying can be incredibly traumatic, especially for individuals who are already predisposed to mental health challenges, and trauma can play a significant role in the development of psychosis.
Wow, so it's not just a social problem. It can have a real impact on brain health.
Exactly. It's crucial to understand the full scope of the problem and recognize that bullying can have profound and long-lasting effects on both mental and physical well-being.
And this is all compounded by the fact that bullying often leads to social isolation, which can further exacerbate mental health issues.
Right, it's like a vicious cycle. The bullying causes the isolation, which then increases the risk of developing or worsening mental health problems.
It's a downward spiral, really.
It can be.
There's another connection I want to touch on before we move on, and that's the link between bullying and borderline personality disorder, particularly early onset BPD.
Yeah, this is an area that's gaining more attention in research.
I'll admit I'm not as familiar with that one. Can you kind of explain the connection for our listeners?
Sure. So borderline personality disorder is characterized by a pattern of instability in relationships, intense emotions, and a fragile sense of self. And what research is showing is that early childhood trauma, including bullying, can be a significant contributing factor in the development of BPD.
Wow.
It can disrupt a child's emotional development and make it much harder for them to form healthy attachments and to cope with stress in healthy ways.
Wow, that's a lot to process. It seems like bullying can have a ripple effect. on so many different aspects of a person's life: their physical health, their
Hmm.
social relationships, their mental well-being, their future prospects. It's clear that this is not an issue we can afford to ignore.
I completely agree. And while this might all seem quite bleak, I think it's important to remember that there's hope. There's a lot we can do to intervene to prevent bullying and to help those who have been affected heal and move forward.
That's a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive. We've laid the groundwork here, understanding the nature of bullying and its profound effects. Now let's explore the roles that schools, parents, and even individuals can play in creating safer and more supportive environments for children.
I'm eager to get into that.
Me too, because ultimately we're all responsible for protecting children and ensuring their well-being.
Exactly.
So stay tuned, everyone. We're just getting started.
So let's start by talking about the role that schools can play in addressing bullying. After all, it's where children spend a significant portion of their time, and it's often where these harmful dynamics play out.
Yeah, it's like the primary setting for every coming-of-age story,
Mm.
whether it's a heartwarming tale of friendship or a darker exploration of, social hierarchies. But in all seriousness, what concrete steps can schools take to combat bullying effectively?
Well, I think the first and perhaps most crucial step is fostering a culture of zero tolerance. This means establishing clear policies against bullying, communicating those policies consistently to students, parents, and staff, and ensuring that everyone understands the consequences of engaging in such behavior.
It's not just about having rules on paper, it's about actually enforcing them.
Exactly. And a big part of that is providing comprehensive training for teachers and administrators. They need to be equipped to recognize the various forms that bullying can take, including the more subtle and insidious ones that we discussed earlier, like social exclusion or cyberbullying.
It's about giving them the tools and knowledge to identify red flags, intervene effectively, and support both the victims and the bullies in a way that promotes healing and positive change.
Precisely, and beyond individual interventions. Schools can also implement broader anti-bullying programs that address the issue systemically. These programs can involve a range of strategies, from classroom discussions and role-playing exercises to peer mediation and mentorship programs.
Well, yeah, I remember when I was in school, they had this program where older students were paired with younger ones as buddies. It was designed to create a more supportive and inclusive environment.
That's a great example of a simple yet effective strategy that can foster a sense of community and belonging. Another key element is providing adequate supervision, especially in areas where bullying is more likely to occur, like hallways, bathrooms, playgrounds, those sorts of places.
It's not about being big brother, it's about creating a sense of accountability.
Exactly.
But, schools can't do this alone.
Mm.
Parents have a huge role to play in preventing and addressing bullying as well.
Oh, absolutely. Parents are a child's first and most important line of defense. They have the power to shape their child's understanding of empathy, respect, kindness, and to instill values that counteract bullying behavior.
It all starts at home, right? Creating a nurturing and supportive environment where children feel safe to express their feelings and talk about their experiences is so crucial.
You're spot on. Open communication is key. Encourage your children to talk about their school day, both the good and the bad. Pay attention to their nonverbal cues, their changes in mood or behavior, any subtle hints that something might be wrong.
It's not always about having these big sit-down conversations. Sometimes it's just about being attuned to those subtle signals. Like if your child suddenly becomes withdrawn or starts avoiding social situations, that could be a red flag that something's amiss.
Exactly. And even if your child isn't being bullied directly, it's still important to talk to them about bullying in general. Explain what it is, why it's harmful, and what they can do if they witness it happening to someone else.
Empowering them to be upstanders, not bystanders.
Mm.
And beyond prevention, parents also need to be prepared to support their children. If they do become targets of bullying, validate their feelings, reassure them that it's not their fault, and work with them to develop a plan of action.
That plan could involve talking to the school, seeking professional counseling, or even exploring alternative schooling options if the situation warrants it.
It's about finding the right resources and support system to help your child heal and regain their sense of safety and well-being.
Precisely. And part of that support involves helping your child build resilience. Resilience isn't about being tough or ignoring problems. It's about equipping them with the tools and coping mechanisms to navigate challenges effectively.
It's about teaching them how to advocate for themselves,
Mhm.
set healthy boundaries, and bounce back from adversity.
Exactly. It's about nurturing their self-esteem and helping them develop a strong sense of self-worth. that can't be easily shaken by the actions of others.
So it's not just about protecting them from harm. It's about empowering them to flourish. And I think it's also important to remember that parents aren't alone in this fight. We've talked about the role of schools, but what about the broader community? What role can communities play in creating a culture that rejects bullying?
That's a fantastic question. Communities can play a pivotal role in fostering environments where bullying is less likely to occur in the first place. It starts with promoting positive social norms, celebrating diversity, and encouraging inclusivity.
It's about creating spaces where everyone feels valued, respected, and safe to be themselves regardless of their differences.
Exactly, and that can involve a wide range of initiatives, from community-wide anti-bullying campaigns to organizing events that bring people together and promote understanding and empathy.
Like community dialogues or cultural festivals, or even just creating opportunities for people from different backgrounds to interact and connect.
Those are all great examples, and communities can also provide valuable resources for both victims and bullies. This could include support groups, counseling services, mentoring programs, or even just safe spaces where young people can go to talk and feel heard.
It's about creating a network of support that extends beyond the immediate family and school environment.
Exactly.
And while we've focused primarily on prevention and intervention, it's equally important to address the issue of healing. For
Absolutely.
those who have already been affected by bullying, what steps can they take to move forward and reclaim their lives?
That's a great point. We've talked a lot about the negative impact. But let's shift our focus now to the process of healing and recovery. What steps can they take to move forward and reclaim their lives?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we've covered so much ground already, unpacking the psychological complexities of bullying, exploring its just devastating effects on children's mental health. It's heavy stuff. But I think it's so important to shine a light on these issues and really understand, the scope of the problem.
I couldn't agree more. Awareness is the first step towards meaningful change. And while we've delved into some, difficult topics, I I do want to emphasize that there's always hope. Healing is possible, and there's so much we can do to support children who have been impacted by bullying.
That's such a crucial point. So let's shift our focus now to the process of healing and recovery. What advice would you give to someone who's been bullied, maybe even years ago,
Yeah.
and is still struggling to overcome those experiences?
I think the first and often most challenging step is acknowledging the past. It's about recognizing that the bullying happened, that it wasn't their fault, and that they deserve to heal. Sometimes people try to minimize their experiences or brush them aside, but it's so crucial to validate those feelings and allow yourself to grieve the pain that was inflicted.
It's like giving yourself permission to acknowledge the hurt and begin the process of moving forward. I imagine that self-blame is a
Yeah.
common hurdle for victims of bullying. They might start to internalize
Yeah.
those negative messages
Yeah.
and believe that they were somehow deserving of the abuse.
Absolutely. It's a natural human response to try and make sense of painful experiences. But it's so important to challenge those self-blaming thoughts and remind yourself that bullying is never the victim's fault. The responsibility lies solely with the bully.
It's about reclaiming your narrative and rejecting those harmful messages that were imposed upon you. And I imagine that therapy or counseling can be incredibly valuable in that process. Having a trained professional to guide you through those complex emotions and help you develop healthy coping mechanisms can make a world of difference.
You're absolutely right. Therapy can provide a safe and supportive space to process trauma, challenge negative thought patterns, and rebuild self-esteem. A skilled therapist can help you understand the impact of the bullying, develop strategies for managing anxiety and triggers, and ultimately reclaim your sense of power and agency.
It's about recognizing that you're not alone and that there are resources available to help you navigate this journey. And while therapy is a fantastic resource, there are also things that individuals can do on their own to support their healing process. I'm thinking of things like journaling, mindfulness exercises, or even engaging in creative outlets like art or music.
Those are all great examples.
Oh,
It's about finding healthy coping mechanisms that work for you and allow you to express your emotions in constructive ways. Physical activity can also be incredibly beneficial. Exercise releases endorphins, reduces stress, and can help boost your mood and confidence.
It's about taking care of yourself holistically, mind, body, and spirit. And I think it's also important to focus on building a strong support system. Surround yourself with people who love and care about you, who believe in you, and who uplift you.
That's such an important point. Positive relationships can be incredibly healing. Spend time with people who make you feel good about yourself, who appreciate you for who you are, and who support your growth and well-being.
It's about creating a circle of trust and belonging. That can help counteract the isolation and negativity that often accompany bullying. And while healing from past trauma is essential, it's also crucial to shift our focus to prevention. What can we do as a society to create a world where bullying is no longer tolerated?
That's the ultimate goal, isn't it? And I believe it starts with fostering a culture of empathy and respect. We need to teach children from a young age to value kindness, to celebrate differences, and to understand the impact of their words and actions on others.
It's about instilling a sense of compassion and responsibility from the ground up, and that involves modeling those behaviors ourselves, both in our personal interactions and in the broader societal structures we create.
Absolutely. Children learn by observing the adults around them. If we want to create a world free of bullying, we need to demonstrate empathy, respect, and inclusivity in our own lives. We need to challenge prejudice and discrimination wherever we see it and advocate for policies that promote fairness and equality.
It's about creating a ripple effect of positive change, starting with ourselves and extending outward to our families, our communities, and our institutions. And I think it's also important to empower bystanders to intervene when they witness bullying. We can't just sit back and hope that someone else will take action. We all have a responsibility to speak up and challenge harmful behavior.
I completely agree. Bystanders can play a powerful role in shifting the dynamics of bullying. Even a small act of kindness, like offering support to the victim or calling out the bully's behavior, can make a big difference. It sends a message that bullying is not acceptable and that we won't stand for it.
It's about creating a culture of accountability and collective responsibility. And I think that education is key. We need to educate ourselves about the different forms bullying can take, the warning signs, and the potential consequences. The more we understand about this complex issue, the better equipped we'll be to address it effectively.
That's so true. Knowledge is power. We need to have open and honest conversations about bullying. In our homes, our schools, and our communities, we need to provide resources and support to both victims and bullies. And we need to work together to create a culture where everyone feels safe, valued, and respected.
It's a multifaceted challenge. But I believe that with awareness, education, compassion, and collective action, we can create a world where bullying is no longer a threat to children's mental health and well-being. It's a world we're striving for. And I'm grateful for the work that you and so many others are doing to make that vision a reality.
Thank you. It's been an honor to share this information and to be part of this conversation. I'm hopeful that our discussion today will inspire listeners to take action and contribute to creating a brighter future for all children.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope you found this exploration of bullying and its impact on children's mental health informative and empowering. Remember, you're not alone in this fight. Together, we can make a difference.
Thanks for joining us. And until next time, stay curious and keep learning.